Welcome back to the Impact Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host, Sabine M, and today I'm conversing with Iranian-American film director and producer Chiara Hollender. Chiara's most recent work, Woman of the Earth, was very well received by viewers on the PBS YouTube channel. Her projects are deeply empowered by the work of women and the complexity of nature. She seeks to disrupt the homogenization and colonization of women's voices and has been called to capture stories that focus on healing. In the documentary space, Chiara has collaborated with Radical Media, Discovery Plus, PBS, and more. Welcome, Chiara. I'm really happy to be filming this episode with you and sharing your experience and work with the audience. As all of us have really interesting different beginnings, I always like to ask about how everything began. How did your journey into filmmaking start?
Yeah, I think always was really interested in stories. I think as a kid, stories really shaped the way I saw the world, but I think maybe more importantly how I saw myself and like how I fit into the world and my background and just kind of like feeling seen as a young person. And after college, I had met somebody who owned a production company and we really just hit it off. And it made me realize that I think early on, like the relationships I fostered with people was always going to be like one of the most important things to me when it came to collaboration and working on films and creative projects in general. And so I started working with him mostly just because we really liked each other and kind of spoke the same creative language. And from there, he really taught me how to produce and like how to put a story together. And I owe I think a lot of my beginnings to him, and he's such a lovely person. And I worked with him for a few years and then kind of went out on my own and started making my own films, taking a lot of what he had taught me and also just like a lot of what I had learned over the years. Like in my beginnings of making film and TV shows.
In your experience, do you feel like connections are most important to step a foot in the film industry? Or do you think the right schooling, education, or portfolio is more important? Or a little bit of everything?
Yeah, I definitely think, finding people you connect with and like want to make art with is really important. But I'd say the most important thing for me is like knowing what you want to make and like knowing what you care about and knowing what you want to say. I think you can have all of the schooling in the world and all of the connections in the world, but if you don't have a sense of what speaks to you creatively and like what you want to say to the world and how you want to say it, I think it's easier to learn how to operate a camera than it is to know like, this is what I'm interested in, artistically speaking. And so I think I've always felt like there are some skills that can be taught and other skills that takes a little bit more like internal development, like with like reaching into yourself and like getting a sense of your own creative sensibilities. And I think that's really the most important thing. And that's what I tell whenever I'm talking to like younger people who want to start out in film. I'm always saying like, who inspires you? What inspires you? What do you like to watch? Because so much of the time, like knowing what you like will then inform like what you want to make.
Yeah, that's well said. I think as filmmakers, many of us experienced that making films that are in our field of interest are turning out better than films that are about a topic we're not so invested and passionate about. So finding what's interesting to you might also help to make better films. Your work seems to be mostly inspired by women. When did you decide to focus on stories about women?
Yeah, definitely in my early 20s, I really started to focus on, I think, had a lot of experiences working on films and TV shows about men and with men. And it made me, kind of question if those were the stories that I really wanted to tell and the environments that I really wanted to work in. And I think I always felt like some of my greatest creative inspirations, certainly like my mom and my sister and so many of my female friends, a lot of amazing female teachers and role models in my life really inspired me as a young person. And I've always thought about kind of the quote or the image of like, I feel and recognize that like I am standing on the shoulders of women who have come before me. And so I think when I look to my future, so much of it is like me looking to my past and being like, who were the people who supported me and me up and inspired me? And so many of those people were women.
You also did find some quite inspiring women for your series, Women of the Earth, the project you are probably most known for. How did you find your protagonists and the stories?
Yeah, a lot of word of mouth and like talking to people and driving around and interviewing people. I probably talked to and interviewed, 10 times the amount of women that were actually then able to be featured on the series. And I think everybody I talked to and was put in contact with really taught me something about myself and what I was interested in, and also just like the amazing work that these women were doing. And so, yeah, some of it was, at a certain point, I felt like everybody knew that I was working on this project because that was like so much of what I was pouring my time into. And so much of it was, oh my gosh, Chiara, like, I know this woman, you have to talk to her. And then that person would have somebody else for me to talk to, and that kind of word of mouth. And then a lot of it too was just like, reading articles, listening to podcasts, watching other documentary series that had people in them that made me feel excited. And then, spending time on the internet and hunting them down and getting people's emails and phone numbers and calling them up and seeing if they would talk to me, which a lot of them were willing to do. And that, I feel like I owe so much of that work to the women who are willing to share their stories with me, because my work, especially on my Women of the Earth series, like, it wouldn't be anything without the women who are willing to share their stories with me and share their time with me. Because at the end of the day, these stories are so fueled and inspired by their work, and I'm merely like a facilitator, or, somebody who's kind of like holding space.
It's great that you were sharing their stories. I don't know about any other series that talks about the same topic in that way. Let's have a look at the trailer and then talk more about the series.
Great.
Women are rising up and speaking out, and in many ways that's what the Earth is doing.
We must continue to feed ourselves, to house ourselves, to create medicine.
But to heal the Earth, we have to think of new ways.
Our country is polluted with conventional farms that have been farming the same land with the same crop for years and years and years.
Fire is still a huge threat. We're talking hectares and hectares going up.
If you can change the way that conventional farmers are farming in this country, we can change the Earth.
So the narrative must progress.
Diversity in people, diversity in crops, honoring the earth that you're growing the crop in, so you can't make the same mistakes.
We are a part of a revolution. And I think women are ultimately the ones that are going to lead that movement.
Beautiful and inspiring. Everyone should definitely head over to the YouTube channel of PBS to watch Women of the Earth after this episode. What went into planning this series?
Yeah, the biggest thing was definitely relationship building and building trust with the women who I was collaborating with. So every episode features a different woman and her work that she, has been dedicating her life to. And yeah, a lot of the behind the scenes was, first of all, finding the right people to collaborate with. And as everybody in film knows, it's like right time of year and right weather and right scheduling and timelines and all of that type of stuff. And, once I found the right collaborators, it was really about I'm a big proponent of talking to folks like as much as possible before ever going in with a camera. And so, hours of phone calls to kind of get to know each other and feel comfortable with each other. And then, spending about 7 days filming with a really small crew, what I call verite documentary. So a lot of hanging out, capturing what we capture, really getting a sense of like their day-to-day life, and then, coming back and putting it all together and then doing it all again.
Getting to know the protagonist is helpful in most cases, I'd say. I only know very few directors that just walk on set and start an interview without having talked to the protagonist first. I feel like it makes the people more at ease when they already know you. Because usually in your daily lives, we aren't really followed by cameras, so that can be really nerve-wracking. So making the protagonist feel at ease by talking with them and talking them through the process, getting to know them, that will make them more relaxed and the whole environment more relaxed and fun and efficient in many cases. For the people who don't know yet, how many inspiring women did you get to know and how many episodes did you make?
Yeah, so we made, I had made 2 episodes independently as kind of a passion project with a super small team and with my lovely collaborator, Lauren Nolan, who was both a producer and also the editor for the series. And then when PBS came on board, we made 3 new episodes with them, and we kind of re-edited one of the episodes. So it's 4 episodes altogether.
So you funded the first 2 episodes on your own and then pitched it to PBS? Or how did that collaboration look like?
Yeah, I had heard somewhere on the internet that they were looking for new short form documentary style series. And so I had pitched the idea to them. And then a year or maybe even a year and a half later, we started having more real conversations around their interest for science-leaning content that was specifically for younger female-identifying women. And this series kind of fit perfectly into that because a lot of the women featured are scientists themselves. Obviously, when we're talking about soil and food and climate change and seeds and all of this stuff, there is so much science kind of inherently in the work that they do. And then also for me, as an Iranian-American young female filmmaker, really thinking about diversifying the types of women that are featured, both in terms of their background and ages and the work that they do. And so I think all of those components were really important to me and inherent in the storytelling. And it was kind of the perfect collaboration with PBS because they were looking to expand their audience to really the exact type of audience that I was also hoping to have for this show.
It's great that PBS had a similar vision than you had and that the collaboration worked so well. Can you please synopsize Woman of the Earth for us?
Yeah. So the original idea for this series was to have standalone episodes where women were showing and telling how they were healing land from climate change and also, having positive contributions to the climate crisis in their communities. And, wherever you go in the United States, and the show at this point is only based in the US, would love to, expand it to the whole world at some point in time. But obviously different communities and different types of topography, whether you're near a lake or near a mountain or in the fields, like everybody in the US is dealing with really unique problems when it comes to climate change. And so part of the mission of the show was to kind of expand our reach very far and wide to see how different women are approaching the climate crisis in their own communities. And, I think a big part of the show was my feeling like there was a lack of female voices in the climate change space when it came to solutions. So many documentaries that I watch, it seems like the solutions, which are so important, and there are so many lovely people who are trying to heal and create positive change, which is amazing. But I did feel like a lot of the voices kind of looked and sounded the same. And I just really wanted to highlight some people who weren't being highlighted and maybe in the past weren't as valued as I think they should be.
I think it is a really different view on how to help climate change than in most films. Gardening is something almost everyone can try out. It's not such a far-fetched idea that seems too hard to do or to try. I feel like also because of that, it was received so well. I also read some comments under your videos, and they are wonderful to read. One user says, "I'm loving the series and I'm excited for more." Another one wrote, "I'm so grateful there are people like her actually doing something to save the earth. It takes a lot of bravery and effort to do that. Truly thankful." Someone said, "You give me hope. We so need to repair the damage we have done to the soil we depend on for our food." And it also inspired people to take action, as someone commented. "The idea of microclimate adapted seeds being saved is perfect. I love it. I'm going to do it by leaving some of my plants to go to seed this year." Lots of amazing feedback. Did you expect this feedback when you started?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really believe that so much art, especially film, like it's a conversation between filmmaker and the people in the film and an audience. Like, I think for me, it's meant to be seen and received and had conversations about. And I think the idea that these women and their stories and their work would inspire other people is the most amazing possible outcome. I think like featuring them and lifting them up is so incredible, but then to have other people feel inspired by them and excited to kind of go out and do stuff is just amazing. And one of my favorite fun facts about this series is that virtually all of the women featured don't actually own land themselves. And that's not even something I set out to do specifically, but it just goes to show that you don't necessarily need to own land and have all this fancy equipment and have all these degrees and training to do something that matters to you. And I think that's really, really important for me. And also just knowing that like the barrier to entry to helping and creating positive change doesn't have to be that high. And I think that there's a really important lesson in there that I think a lot of people who watched it felt that.
Yes, I also feel like that is a good way to do it. Most of us don't want to get overloaded with a lot of scientific information. We are story animals, so we want to hear and watch stories and get inspired. Getting motivated is easier when seeing something that seems achievable. You said also you wanted the series to be or take place in different countries and cities. Is there something planned already?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to go everywhere. I think like back to the very first thing I said in the interview, I think storytelling is a way for people to feel seen and feel like they have like a place in the world and like have representation. And I think if I could feature every different type of woman doing every different type of thing to contribute to climate healing, then, you know, that many more women would feel like, oh, if she can do it, I can do it too. And I think that's just such a positive thing that we can like contribute to the world as filmmakers and storytellers. And so, yeah, the more places and people I could feature and lift up, like the better. And I think right now I'm living back in Vermont, which is where I'm from. And I've been working with some local folks here to feature the work they're doing. I'm working with an amazing woman here whose whole job is dedicated to helping heal our local lake from climate catastrophe. We've had like horrible flooding and, you know, I'm watching her do the work that she's doing. And I'm like, it kind of seems like there's these women of the earth and like these female climate warriors everywhere. And that's really inspiring to me. Like whether I'm filming them or not, there are so many women who have so much to say and contribute, and listening to them and spending time with them has been like the biggest gift of my professional life.
There are so many amazing people out there. We just too often don't get to know about them. Thankfully, at least some of their stories get out in the world through documentary films, for example, to inspire people for outside of their circle. As a storyteller, what do you think is most important when telling stories like you do?
That's such a great question, and it's so complex. I feel like when I was younger, this kind of mantra in my mind of do no harm was like really at the forefront of my mind. I think with documentaries, the kind of fable that we've all have been told is that like documentaries are real. And like if you see it or you hear it in a documentary, like that's real and that's fact. And that's not always true. There's a director who is directing things. There's an editor who's editing things. Like there's so many layers of filters that work go through before people even see them. And I think for me, it's really tempting to always try to do the right thing and never do anything wrong and like include everybody and always have positive messaging. And I think that that's all important to strive for. But for me with my work right now, I think the most important thing is just following my heart and like doing what feels truthful to me. I think I can't capture everybody's experience, and like I can't really make films that appeal to everybody in the whole world. I think that's a little bit too high of a bar. And so I think making things that feel important to me, I think adding new narratives instead of repeating narratives that already exist are really important to me. And yeah, I also think that if I can, I would really just like to make art that fosters healing in whatever way. I think that there is so much healing that needs to be done. I mean, certainly within myself, you're unlearning things and like repairing things that have been broken and ways that I've been hurt and, all of these things that humans deal with, not to mention the repair and healing that needs to happen with our natural spaces and with animals. And, I think that focusing on things that are positive and like can bring love and healing to the world, for me with my art, that's just like what I would like to focus on.
There is no one truth. A documentary is always through the eyes of the director and the crew, and then the audience also sees it in a different way. Maybe the director didn't even think of. Everyone has their own minds and their own impressions. And I don't think that a project needs to reach everyone. And not everyone needs to like it. In my opinion, it's more important to reach the right audience. By reaching the right audience that even might be smaller, you can still create a way bigger impact than you would have by reaching a lot of people that aren't the right audience. How are you planning your next project? Would you again start independent and then go to a publishing company? Or would you go from the beginning on this time?
Oh, there are so many ways to go about making art and making films and making TV shows. And I don't think there's really any one right way, but I think for me right now, it's really tempting to almost think about like, what do people want to see? Like, what are the films going to Sundance? What are the films that are like, in the movie theaters? And almost it's tempting to think, oh, I should just make films like that because that's what people want to see and that'll be like easier to sell. And I think for me, for a long time with my series Women of the Earth, a lot of people told me, you will never sell this. This is not a good idea. This is not what people want. But it was important to me. And like, it remained important to me even when it felt like it wasn't a good idea. And so for me right now, I feel like I'm in this kind of rediscovery process of like first tuning in with myself and what I want to do and what I want to say, and keeping that maybe more like to myself in private before I go tell everybody my idea and go try to sell the idea and get collaborators and all that stuff. And so I guess my biggest advice is that it's okay to work on something for a really long time. It's also okay to get excited and interested in something and develop it and then decide, never mind, I don't want to do this. I can't tell you how many decks and things I've built for projects that I haven't made. And it's like, maybe I'll return to them, but I don't want to make something just because I think it'll get recognition or because other people want it. And I think that's not the way to make a lot of money, but it is the way to make sure that you are making art that's important to you. And so right now, I'm actually trying to pivot my career a little bit where I'm making things with people that I like versus making things that are like wholly my own and my own idea. And I think there's kind of a give and take when you're an independent filmmaker of feeling like I really want to be a part of a whole, and versus feeling like this has to be my project and my show and I have to be the director and producer. And I think I'm just rediscovering how lovely it is to work on projects with friends, work on things just for fun, and again, kind of, get back in touch with like what matters most to me versus thinking about what's going to make me the most money and be the most popular and make me a famous director and all of those thoughts that we all have, but that are not always actually going to make us happy.
There are certainly a lot of different paths one can take to create and publish a film. Looking at what's currently trending might work, but I feel like trends are over so fast, so better stick to stories that mean something to you rather than following a trend. Reminding yourself why you started and why you love it, it's important once in a while. Otherwise, you just get into a circle chasing after work and lose the fun and the passion, and that's sad. With Women of the Earth, how long did it take you to create the whole series? And what were your ups and downs?
Yeah, so I worked on the idea for about 4 years by myself, making these two short episodes that I produced with a friend, and it was very, pieced together and took a long time to make. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing it that way, but I was young and I, was just kind of like feeling out what felt good to me. Yeah. And then once PBS came on board, it was about 7 months to make the 4 episodes all together. And it was pretty quick. It was like we'd be in pre-production for an episode, we'd go out and shoot it, and then as we were editing it, we would be in pre-production for the next episode. And like the second the episode dropped, I'd be back out in the field shooting the second episode. And that was really fun because there was kind of no time to overthink. Yeah. It was like we're just kind of keeping this ball rolling, and I felt really deeply embedded in the work, and that was really exciting. And, I think with all projects, there's going to be, like, I always wish I had more time. I always wish I had more money. And I think, especially when you're working with a collaborator like a PBS or with a different network or whoever, I think you have to figure out what works for both people. And they needed to be on kind of a faster timeline because they wanted the episodes to air quickly. And so, as a creative, you just kind of make it work if you can.
I definitely get that. We always think if we had more time or more money, it would be better. But for you, it sounds like it was an eventful 7 months. Did PBS change a lot of your original ideas, or did you keep most of the creative control?
They were pretty hands off, all things That's considered. Great. I hadn't worked with them before. Yeah. They were so lovely. I would kind of come to them with the idea for the episode and with the subject collaborator, and basically every time they were like, yeah, sounds great. She sounds Amazing. Really interesting. And then they would give mostly notes on rough cuts and second cuts, and then of course on the fine cuts. But that was really it. They were very trusting, and I think as the episodes were being put together, there was more and more trust being built.
Yeah.
And so, by the fourth episode, it felt like I know what they're interested in. They know what my like artistic sensibility is as a creative, and it just got better and better as we went along. And I'm so proud of all of the episodes. But definitely watching the fourth one, I'm like, yeah, I feel like we really like honed in on exactly what this show looks and feels like and is about. And I'm really proud of the series, and I'm so grateful for all the people that I worked with.
Sounds like a good collaboration.
Yeah.
Great that you could keep your creative freedom for the most part, and that you got to reach a big audience through PBS. As you said earlier, you now live in Vermont. Vermont is known for many things. The film industry isn't really one of them. Do you feel like you have to sacrifice some work opportunities for calm living in nature?
1,000%. 1,000%. I knew when I moved back here that my work would kind of take a toll, and that not everybody would be as interested in, flying me places for shoots or letting me work remotely. And that's been really hard. I think life is full of hard decisions and sacrifices. And, the biggest thing I feel being here is that I'm so happy living here that I feel like my creative self is really able to flourish and feel really full and like excited. And I think ultimately, even though I know I'll lose out on certain work opportunities because I'm here, work is one part of life. And as much as I love work and am so career focused, I think that I know on a deeper level that I need to be making sure that the whole of myself feels content. And Vermont is a place that makes me feel, really whole and happy. And so I shall remain here for now.
Yeah, I heard from many people that they feel like they need to move to a different city or country in order to find success. In some cases, that might be true, depending on what you do. But in general, I think nowadays the location isn't that much of an issue anymore. I also thought I probably should move somewhere to the sea, as I'm leading an ocean conservation communication organization, and my film work mainly focuses on sharing the love for the ocean and the work protecting it that people, especially women, do. But I managed to do everything from where I live now, which isn't at the sea. And for shoots, I can still travel there. And contacts can be found anywhere. You can email people or go to events like Wild Screen or Jackson Wild, where we met, or film festivals.
Totally. Yeah, I think there's also, I was talking to somebody about this recently, and maybe it kind of sounds silly, but it's like, if you're making films, you're a filmmaker. If you're painting, you're a painter. If you're writing, you're a writer. You don't have to work at a big fancy company and make a documentary that's on Netflix to be an artist. Yeah. And I think this time in Vermont is really just allowing me to, kind of embrace that me practicing my art is me being an artist. And I can be an artist wherever I go in every facet of my life, and it doesn't have to look like any particular thing. And you don't have to live in any particular place to do what you want to do.
I think that's a very good view on things and puts less pressure on yourself. I feel like as young filmmakers, we sometimes tend to compare ourselves to others, especially as we see all of these highlight reels on social media. Do you feel like sometimes you did compare yourself to other filmmakers around your age and it made you feel a certain way?
Absolutely. And I still do it. I'm 2 weeks off Instagram actually recently because I was getting so paralyzed by the comparison. It's not helpful for me. And, I think all of the hours that I spend comparing myself to other people, I could be making my own art and like focusing on myself. And I think it's a really hard thing to do, and I recognize that, but I also think it's really important. And I forget who said this, some brilliant woman somewhere in the world, I'm sure, just reminding ourselves that there's like only one of us, and there will only ever be one of all of us in the world. And so we all have something important and special to say. And I'm a really big proponent of, there are filmmakers and writers who I love and adore, and I watch their films and I think, oh my gosh, I want to do what she's doing. I want her career. Like, I want to learn how to be the kind of artist that she is. And I think it's really important to admire people and watch other people's art, but, sitting around spending too much time wishing you were something or someone else, at some point it becomes not the best use of your time. Yeah. And so I feel the comparison aspect a lot, but I try to remind myself that I have something special and unique to say, and I should spend time saying it versus thinking about what that person's doing over there.
I definitely did compare myself a lot too, especially right out of university when I didn't quite know what direction I should go. Too many people told me where to go, but that wasn't really the path I wanted to follow. And I really had to sit down and think what I want to do and how I want to use my work. Seeing only success stories on social media of people from the industry that I had met definitely pressured me and didn't make me feel great. Only after really figuring out my path and then following it, I wasn't comparing myself with anyone anymore, but was just happy for everyone's success. But I definitely think that it's important to focus on ourselves, learning from others, but don't compare ourselves. And remember that everyone has a different story, a different location they live in, different contexts, different goals, and that social media really only is a highlight reel for most people. My last question is, what would you recommend to other young women who want to start a career in filmmaking?
Start small, but try to make your own stuff. I think there is so much value in collaboration and finding mentors, but I think the most important thing is finding your own voice and your own artistic sensibility. And so whether it's writing a scene or making a short video on your iPhone or, doing really anything, I think feeling out kind of what you want to do and just going for it, even if it's really small. And it's funny I'm giving this advice because I'm the person who's always like, I have to make this feature and I have to write this feature film and I have to write a whole television show. And it's like, okay, just write a scene, just write 2 pages. And I think doing it yourself and like working on your own projects, even if it's in a really small way, is really, really important to know that I have something to say and I can write alone in my room or make my own documentary in my backyard and just have fun. I think that's really important.
Chiara, it was wonderful talking with you and learning more about your story. I hope to see you soon on the podcast again.
That sounds so great. Thank you for talking to me today. I love talking to you, so thanks for having me.
Thank you.